I've had quite a varied and colourful year, to be honest with you, and with so much that's happened. And I wanted to tell you a little story today. It's about Swanbridge in Surrey. But before we get there, I've been on YouTube since 2007, and it's only really the past year that I've actually made any money out of it. I just had my second YouTube paycheck of about 75 quid. And and I started these sort of regular videos that I'm doing now on top of the other videos that I put on and the stuff that I put on for my classes. And the year's been a massive contrast. I've pulled away a lot from my teaching. And one of the key reasons why I kept teaching was to keep somebody employed. And and that person's no longer working for us. The one thing, I've been involved in archaeology for just under 40 years. That's quite a long time. And, these regular sessions that I've been doing were basically as a sort of reaction to the passing of Ross Broderstock. And I felt recently that some of my videos have been very sort of very negative and very sort of getting things off my chest. And that's probably what I'll continue to do, because I might have 2 qualifications in archaeology, actually 3, and with all that said, I'm seeing sort of the end of my archaeological career, because one of the things that I was going to do in 2020 was I was going to retire semi, if not more or less completely, from my teaching, and in a way that's where I'm going, because I'm teaching sort of 2.5 classes at this moment, and I've got another group in Barry, but that's to do with the charity. And when I started off in archaeology, it was very, very different, and as the years went by, it caused me a lot of pain to try and make our history, archaeology, and heritage relevant. And when you're in a complete island of pain, and not many people understanding what archaeology has actually become, you start to think that it's sort of, you start to turn away from it. And in many ways, that's what I'm doing by doing lots of these reactionary videos, because I don't actually care anymore who and where and why for all, who it upsets and all the rest of it, or just trying to get the message out there. Warnings, basically, of how bad the situation is in archaeology, heritage, history circles in Cymru, Wales. And one thing I will say, what we're good at doing in Wales is we chuck money at something, we just leave it and it falls down. We set up little projects and we expect them to keep going, and they don't. And this is what we're up against, really. So that's quite convoluted. I just wanted to get that off my chest, actually. I wanted to tell you a little bit of a story about Swanbridge. near Sully. So to give you a bit of context, where's Sully? Where's Swanbridge? Where are we? So you've got that little weird bit that sticks out in Wales at the bottom, and you've got this bit over here that's the Gower. So you go over here, and that there between Swansea and Cardiff, that there is South Glamorgan, and if you want to be more precise, the Vale of Glamorgan. You go between Cardiff Wales Airport, Barry, and Penarth, Cardiff. Between Barry and Penarth, there's a place called Sully. And a little bit towards Penarth is a place called Swanbridge. Now, let's give you some background. In the late 1960s, 1970s, Swanbridge, along with a bay, which is again further towards Penarth, St. Mary's Well Bay, was a bit of a holiday resort, quite a successful holiday resort. Swanbridge was a bit sort of behind, but you know, in the 1970s there was a scheme to make it like another sort of Barry Island, but it really didn't get off ground. The local developer got a load of concrete and cement and stuff and dumped it there, and was going to build up sort of promenades and sort of quays and stuff. It fell through, and all that rubbish was there for quite some time, and most of it's now been removed by the owner of the local pub. Anyway, so before that as well, the bay of Swanbridge, yes, because that's what it is, because opposite Swanbridge is what we now know as Sully Island. But back in the medieval period, Sully Island was actually connected to the mainland, so it wasn't an island at all. And that created a bay. Now, in that bay, you find lots of oyster pot paraphernalia and sort of cuts into rock and sort of all this type of stuff, and the odd wreck as well. There's one wreck on the muds of the island of Sully, looking, that's northwards, but that turns out to be a brig, I think it is, if that's right, or is it a ketch? A ketch, yeah, ketch, not a brig, ketch, from the early 1900s. Anyway, so in the year is, if I can get this right, it's early 1997, and I have a phone call from a local developer, and I think his name is Livingston, I think it was, and he was involved with a guy called Van Prague. We'll talk about Van Prague again. Anyway, what had happened and transpired is that they were building housing estate on the old site of Swanbridge Farm, a sort of brick-built farm there that had probably been there for, not exactly sure about the dates, but up until 1997, had probably been there for just under 100 years or so. Anyway, this place of Swanbridge Farm could have been earlier, but they demolished it basically. It's gone, and they were building the development. Now, I was called in to be a watch and brief archaeologist, so I undertook a watch and brief at the locality, but it wasn't exactly kosher. And what we mean by that, I was supposed to write what's called a project design, a watch and brief report. And I went out to the site to sort of prepare this watch and brief report, and the developer had already dug the trenches. And I thought, right, there's something really not right here. And this guy turned up on site and he gave me 150 quid. This is 1997. And he said, right, just write a report and just like go. Well, the problem was, I couldn't do the project design because, you know, the trenches had already been dug. And the developer turned up and he said, right, here's 150 quid. I want you to just produce a report. And I said, well, you've already done the work. And he said, yeah, but you've got to do the report. So I thought, right, okay. So I inspected all the trenches. It was like a rectangular form, and there was nothing in the trenches except for one. And I learned a lesson after this. I had an old camera with me, and for whatever reason, the camera wasn't working. It was an old, cartridge, sort of, was it 45mm camera, whatever. So my camera wasn't working. My automatic building level, I was sort of functioning. Anyway, long story short, in one of the trenches, it was the northeastern corner of the trench, in the rectangular form. There were stakes sticking out about a foot below the surface, and this was some kind of key. It was all sort of thick, sort of shaly muds. And what transpired underneath the area of this sort of farm, the Swanbridge farm, which could be said to be a little bit of a model farm, but anyways, underneath Swanbridge farm, back then in the medieval period, 1300s, that had been a little inlet. And since then, it all sort of shelled up and silted up. But that had obviously been a little inlet. And this thing that I was looking at was a medieval key. There was all these really thick stakes sticking up, and I got really excited. And I thought, oh my God, this is important. It was a medieval key. There was these stakes sticking up. And I took one of the stakes away with me. I kept it in the fridge for years, but didn't have the resources to get anything radiocarbon dated anyway. There was this timber, and the date I've got is, it must have been medieval date, because when that was an inlet was obviously before Ordnance Survey maps, was probably at the time that Selly Island was connected to the land. So for me, it was medieval. It was these stakes sort of, because the trench had gone, because the digging of the trench had gone through it. You could see sort of one stake here, trench, and another stake here, and that stuff gone in the middle. So so I took one of the stakes out. Anyway, I got really excited by this, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. This is an amazing find. So this is where I made my mistake. I phoned the developer and said, look, I got to come back on Monday to take some photographs. And I told him, there was something in one of the trenches, right? It looks like there's a medieval key. And he thought, that's really interesting, right? So basically all I've got of that key is in my head, right? I produced a little bit of a report, but it was lacking something. And I'll tell you what it was lacking now. So when I said to the developer, go back on Monday, take photographs and stuff. And he said, yeah, fine, that's okay. Go for it. So I turned up on Monday, and what had happened, all the trenches had been filled with concrete, and any evidence of a key was no longer visible. So the evidence that I'd seen a couple of days earlier on was now no longer visible. And because I needed my camera and to sort of coordinate with the level and everything, I didn't manage to take a location because the evidence was already hidden and lost. So I'm going to say it, I'm the only archaeologist to ever see the remains of the old medieval harbour at Swanbridge, because I didn't have the equipment on site to record it that day. And that's something I've always regretted if I'd not said anything. And the problem is, I think that this Mr. Livingston had probably thought, I think it was John, not sure, it was probably that he panicked and he thought, right, if this is reported upon, what's going to happen is, they're going to stop my development. So, what we've got to do in history and archaeology is record these things, but it's just dog eat dog life. It's almost as if people are so paranoid. Do you know what? Even if I'd have reported upon it, even if I'd got photographs of it, right, the development would have already been up anyway. It would have been too late. But at least we'd have had a record. But we didn't. Anyway, I'm going to keep these videos going. And any questions, put them down below. And did I find any pottery? Unfortunately, all the trenches had been dug out. And the day that I was recording it, there was water filling up in the trenches. So I really couldn't record much at all. Bugger. Anyway, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join. And if you want me to continue doing these videos, please thumbs up and just encouragement would be good. Thank you very much. And go from there. Thank you. Bye. Like and subscribe.